Welcome back to Worst Seats in the House. Michael Russo, Anthony LaPanta. Vinny LaPanta is actually going to make an in-person appearance on the podcast today with Vinny's thoughts in the middle segment. Our next live show is actually Tuesday night in a couple days at Splitrocks up in Wyoming. So hopefully everybody will come on out for that. It'll be a fun show, 7 p.m. We'll be talking a lot of Minnesota Wild there, especially with the draft in 3 or 4 days after that. No first-round pick for the Wild this year, at least currently. Then free agency soon after that. So we'll have a lot to talk about. We'll have a lot to talk about the Wild on this podcast. And again, that's June 24th, Splitrocks, 7 p.m. Anthony, I just got back from the Stanley Cup Final. They didn't wait for the parade to get going in Sunrise in Fort Lauderdale. As I was leaving my hotel the other day, I hit insane amount of traffic, and I'm talking within 200 yards where my hotel is of the Elbow Room. And guess what happened? Like bright and early, I had just left the arena essentially 7 hours
because you were there till 2 a.m. for sure writing.
We left at 2:30, 3 o'clock, and there 7 a.m. is the cup with all the teammates just going bonkers. Just tons and tons of fans. They were there all afternoon as well, and it was just a party right there on Fort Lauderdale Beach, just like last year.
Just like last year, very similar Stanley Cup Finals for me. I'm just coming off a golf course with no celebrations, no parties, no nothing. Did just miss a call from Margot. She apparently didn't know we were starting the show right now, but very excited about it. I saw some of the social media posts though, and there is something about watching guys who have completed that grind and the climb and the fight. And I've always felt like those celebrations were maybe more real and authentic when there weren't cameras in there. It's cool for us to be able to see them, but it's really something to watch guys who have been through what it takes to win and to get to the finish line together, and then just to watch them now cut loose.
Yeah.
Now I've got 3 months before I've got to lace them up again, even start thinking about training, whatever, getting ready for the season. It's so cool to watch just that absolute, what the exhaustion level is, combined with the excitement level. There's something special about watching teams win.
And I was talking to Verhaeghe about this, but when you have as many short off seasons as both these teams have, because the Oilers basically have had 3 in a row too, because they went to the Western Conference Final 3 years ago. Your off season is not really training; it's recovery mode, and it explains why when we were down there in October, like they were not a good team yet. It takes a while to get amped up. It takes a while to get motivated. But to your point. So we're leaving the arena and we go out to the ice because we hear this music. They're up in the suite partying with family and everything like that at like 3-something in the morning. And they're playing Pink Pony Club. So they're right away trolling the Edmonton Oilers, which is their song. They have this attitude, this team. They are like on the ice. They are the same way sort of off the ice. They just go right at you. And we're seeing it right now with Brad Marchand on social media. He's become the personality of Brad Marchand again. He's thanking all the teams of all his teammates that cut them loose. So he thanked the Minnesota Wild for Dmitry Kulikov, the Flames for Bennett and Marchand, every team that's ever given up on, Bennett and Tkachuk, every team that's ever given up on Forsling. Verhaeghe, he mentioned every team except the Toronto Maple Leafs, which I found interesting, the team that initially drafted him. And I found that interesting because a lot of us think that Marchand's thinking of signing with the Leafs. So he basically went through one by one every player and thanked their previous team. Nico Sturm, the San Jose Sharks. I mean, it's just Nate Schmidt, the Winnipeg Jets. He's become Brad Marchand immediately off the ice, the little troll, the little rat.
Yeah, and there was one post right away that was thank you Boston for Brad Marchand.
Right, that was Tkachuk.
And which was, I found entertaining. And yeah, but you won. You deserve you get to do whatever you want right now. You won. You won the hardest trophy to win in sports. You completed the grind. You won 16 games when nobody else did in the postseason. Now you get to say and do whatever you want.
Yep. Let's talk about a little bit about the series. Let's go start with the Edmonton perspective. Brett McDavid just looked pissed after the game. You know, he said that he was.
Yeah. How about his comment about that? It just felt like we've been doing the same thing, and
like it definitely the conversation was against the coach.
Exactly, and which surprised me a little bit
because that's his junior coach, Chris Knobloch.
And I've always felt like he was a big supporter, and maybe he didn't mean it that way, but that's certainly the way it came across. Was we
doing
tried the same thing over and
yeah.
over again, just beating our head against the wall, and I don't know if he meant that we came this close and lost again, or if it was truly we didn't really make an adjustment at any point to the way we play. And Florida was the better team. They should have won the series in 5 if it wasn't for a remarkably fortunate series of events that allowed Edmonton to steal Game 4. This series is over in 5 games, which is what it probably should have been. And Florida was better. But to Edmonton's credit, this is 2 years in a row they made it to the finals, when in neither case do I think they were a no-brainer team to be the best in the West. And yet both times they overachieved along the way throughout the first 3 rounds and got there.
See, I don't think they overachieved. I just think that Florida is that good. I think Florida
overachieved to beat the other teams in the West.
Right.
Because I don't think they were the best team in the West in either season. And if you look at this year's playoff, we've talked about it a couple of times. If Quentin Byfield chips a puck off the glass in round 1, they lose round 1. But the bottom line is then they beat Vegas, then they beat Dallas. And they did it in a way that you never would have thought possible. They had better goaltending and they had better defense. And I don't know how they slept it together with John Klingberg and Jake Wallman and you name the guys up and down that defensive core, Kulak, guys that nobody else would put in their top 4, and yet they were playing 23 minutes a night in front of a couple goaltenders that nobody would have said, hey, if I'm trying to make a run to the cup, the guy I want is Calvin Pickard, or Stuart Skinner for that matter. And yet they'd got there 2 years in a row. And I think you have to give them some credit for that.
And McDavid said last year was heartbreak. This year was anger. That's what he said today. But I was shocked. Like, they've got to be tearing. They're like, him and Draisaitl have to be tearing their heads, like their hair out with how they get, because Florida's not going away. You get this close, it is hard. And you saw, like, I'm going, so after the game, I come, we're watching the celebration upstairs. I'm quickly finishing up our file at the gun stories. And we go down, we drop our stuff off at the press room to then go. So the way it works at National, I'm going back to when they were National Car Rental Center in 98. The way it works at Amerant Bank Arena is you come down the freight elevator, you go left, and you go around basically half the building. And they have this makeshift press room that's an old storage area.
First to get in the elevator, you walk past the Michael Russo photo on the wall.
That is true. That is absolutely true. So anyway, so we put our stuff down there, and it's right by the Edmonton room. And now we got to go back to essentially where we started to get into this holding area for us to go on the ice and interview players once the celebration is over. Well, as we're going by the Edmonton room, we're talking like 15 minutes after the game. I've never seen anything this quick. Darnell Nurse, Evander Kane, Jeff Skinner, Stuart Skinner, forgetting one, Corey Perry, just dressed in their suits and storming right to the bus. Like, got the heck out of Dodge. That was one frustrating way for that team to lose. It wasn't even close. Like, last week we were talking when we did our podcast, I think it was 2-2 the series. And we were talking about a couple overtime games. This thing is a series. But then when you break it down after the series is over, games 5 and 6, absolute domination by the Florida Panthers. They led 255 minutes in the series. That's an NHL record for longest time leading in a Stanley Cup final. This series, like, they widened the gap over the Oilers.
It wasn't close. And that was what I was saying earlier, is that if not for an unbelievable comeback by Edmonton in Game 4, that I still... I don't really even, it doesn't make any sense to go down this road. But if a tripping call is called early in the third period when it's 3-zip, then I'm convinced they didn't call because it was 3-zip and give Florida another power play, and the game's probably over.
Right.
They didn't call it. To Edmonton's credit, they come back. I still can't believe they won that game, but they did somehow, some way. But Florida was so much better. They were so much deeper. They were so much. They were better in every phase of the game. Actually, one of the things, I don't want to jump on Vinny's thoughts, because I don't know if this is one of his thoughts. I haven't heard about it yet, but he and I did talk about it last week. Like right now,
I figure you guys rehearsed this on the way here.
We haven't even. I haven't talked. All we've talked about is golf, because we just beat the hell out of my brother Steve on the golf course for 18 holes. So I hope Steve listens to this show. But he brought up a point the other day that right now, if you were either trying to make a run to win a cup or had to win a big game in the cup finals, is there a goaltender you'd pick over Sergei Bobrovsky?
No.
I don't know that there is anymore. And when you think about it, it was only 2.5 years ago, people were talking about that as the worst contract in hockey.
Yeah.
Because he was making $10 million a year, and it was that bang for the buck, it might be the worst contract in the league. Now you're talking about a guy like, who would you rather have to win a big game than him?
I agree with you. And we saw that in game 2, right? The overtime winner that Marchand scored. Remember, he gives up 3 goals early, and he just locked it down the rest of the way. Like even the games where he's given up 3 or 4 goals in the playoffs, he's usually at the end of the night the better of the 2 goaltenders. He very easily could have been on Conn Smythe ballots. I will talk about this later. Somebody did ask me in the tweets why I went Bennett over Marchand. I'll give my rationale later.
Just out of curiosity, you have to have those in at the end of the second period.
No,
right?
10 minutes left in the third, and you could put contingencies on there. So like my third was Draisaitl, but in parentheses, I said if Bobrovsky gets a shutout, change my third pick to Bobrovsky, because I pretty much knew it wasn't going to change. I knew it was going to be Marchand Bennett Marchand either way. So that's the way it works. Like last year, last year it was funny.
But I mean, game 7 with 10 minutes to go. Let's say there was a game 7. There's a lot that could change in 10 minutes.
Well, heck, we had to do that last year, and I had every scenario on my ballot last year in game. You know, what if this happens, if this happens, when we turn in at 10 minutes. And you have to do that no matter what in any elimination game in the Stanley Cup Finals. So even last year in the game where Florida lost 8-1 in game 4, we still at 10 minutes mark had to just throw in a ballot just to send it in. But, you know, like Bob easily could have been on there. He was great throughout. You know, even in the Eastern Conference Final that I covered, and it is, and it's an MVP of the playoffs, not just one round. But I will say, when push came to shove, to your point, as you always talk about Draisaitl and McDavid, those guys the last couple games didn't produce. Where in game 6, when they didn't want to go back to Edmonton, every single Florida star came through. From Bob, as we just talked about, to Barkov having the game of his series with by the way, we saw it after the game, a palm that had been, since game 1, absolutely sliced. I mean, disgusting. It kind of explains some things, at least offensively, why he wasn't producing. Verhey, he has 3 assists. Barkov, 2 assists. Reinhart, 4 goals, 2 empty netters. Kachuk, the cup clinching goal. Forsling, just absolutely sensational. Ekblad, great. Like I'm forgetting one. Bennett was pointless, but he was outstanding in the game. It just, those guys came through, and then when you list all those, like there's the difference, the depth that I just mentioned. They have 7, 8 studs, incredible guys,
right? And their studs all stepped up, and they have more of them. They don't have any 2 that are at the level of the big 2 for Edmonton, but they've got. If you said, all right, just start to rank the players on these 2 rosters. Maybe McDavid and Draisaitl are 1, 2. Probably the next 7 come from Florida.
Right. And that just shows you in hockey, it's not just 1 star or 2 stars, even in this case, that could get it done. Obviously, Zach Hyman, the loss of him in this series was just mammoth. You really saw it in games 5 and 6. They're trying different wingers with McDavid, guys like Arvidsson and obviously Perry, and just over and over. Podkolzin got some shifts there. It just was a huge loss. Evan Bouchard, tough game 6. Ekholm, tough games 5 and 6. I think he wasn't exactly healthy. Evander Kane just taking penalties throughout, and then takes, goes after Kachuk pretty much with a couple minutes left in game 6, and then gets kicked out of the game, doesn't come back out for the handshake line.
Yeah, what did you think about that, by the way?
Right when he left, I knew he wasn't going to come back out. I think with class, he would have.
Well, he has no class, so that's a done deal.
Yeah, but it just, to me, like, I would have come back out. That was me. But I just think that for him to go after Kachuk, they obviously have an unbelievable, like, you know how I was thinking the other day, like Marchand, he gets to Florida and he like becomes brothers with all these guys, right? Kachuk, he embraces afterwards, says, this is what it's all about, brother. Bennett and him had this crazy rivalry. They became pals. Same thing with Ekblad and him. He has publicly said that he hated Ekblad before he got here. They became pals. And it is a common thing in hockey that you join forces at times with guys who are your rivals. I don't think Kachuk and Kane could ever do it. Like, there's a genuine hatred between those two. Well, it's gotten personal, the things they say to each other.
Kachuk's not the only one that has a hatred toward Evander Kane.
Yeah.
I mean, that's been normal. But I had a number of people that have asked me about it recently. That's why I was just curious what you thought about it. That I think it says a lot that he didn't come back out and shake hands.
Yeah.
And
he took just bad penalties all throughout the series.
All series.
Yeah, and you can't win that way. And eventually it just catches up to you. Florida, they check better than I think I've ever seen, Anthony. And I'm not just talking physically. Like they envelope you. The way that Forsling just could close gaps and close space on guys like McDavid and Draisaitl and get sticks on it. That's how they check too, is with their sticks. And we always talk about that with Jonas Brodin. Like, one of the best ways that he checks is his mobility and his stick, and he drives players crazy. And I just, like, a lot of teams try to play the style of the Florida Panthers. Not a lot of teams, not any team does it as well. I mean, just look at the Wild. They try to play that style. They easily could have won that Vegas series, if not probably for a Game 5 offsides. They try to play that way. Bill's trying to like create a team that's very emblematic of that team, especially when it comes to size and physicality. Carolina tries to play that way. They just don't have the personnel to play like the Florida Panthers. Bill Zito has created an unbelievable team there, and the window is not closing. They've got a ton of cap space coming up in the next couple of years.
They do, but it's interesting that you bring that up, because I've thought about this a little bit. About over now for 2 years, they've been the best team, and really for the last 4 years, they've been right there. And they got a break, started their run a couple of years ago, coincidentally, when Marchand gets stopped on a breakaway in Game 5 of that series. And if he scores, Boston wins 4-1. And Who knows if Florida begins this journey that they've been on. But I talked about some of the defensemen on whom Edmonton was leaning. Look at the guys that are a part of Florida's defensive core. Anybody in the league could have had Dmitry Kulikov.
Right.
Anybody in the league could have had Nate Schmidt.
Yep.
Most teams could have had Nico Mikkola.
Yep. Gus Forsling.
That's Forsling has been now that
waivers
right, and I think that's been established. Like, okay, teams missed on him, but that was young in his career where teams missed, and now Florida saw it. These other guys have been like, it isn't. These are guys that nobody would have said, "Hey, I'll take a shot at this guy to be my 6," and yet these are the guys that are anchoring Florida's defensive core. Ekblad's anchoring it, but I know, like, the rest of them they're playing way beyond what anybody ever would have thought.
Well, just look at Seth Jones. He comes there and plays unbelievable, and all those guys, AJ Greer, Gadjevich, they all talked during the series as we were with all our endless off days talking about this franchise, on how everybody that comes there just seems to excel. Like Nate Schmidt says, you're nervous at first because you don't know how you're going to fit in, but it just seems like they have this uncanny ability, the front office. And Bill Zito surrounds himself by very smart people, former players, former executives, sports scientists, analytics people. Like, it's also money's no object. Like, the amount of people in his front office is just impressive. And they find these guys in a cap system that we all talk about how they get guys undervalued and things like that. But then last year when they lost Montour and they lost these top four defensemen and their bottom six, 4 or 5 of their forwards and their backup goalie, they find guys that are able to fit in at reasonable prices, and they're going to do it again this year. They want to always have hungry guys step into that team. And to your point too, like, what does it say about Alexander Barkov and the veterans on this team that they met before the game essentially and came up with this idea that if we win the cup, Barkov obviously has to accept it from Gary Bettman, but we're going to let everybody that has not experienced this before touch the puck before us. So Reinhardt and Bennett and Kachuk and Verhaeghe, they lifted the cup and paraded around the ice after the third goalie that played in the ECHL this year. Guys that didn't play a minute in the playoffs in the series. Pretty impressive the way they think. They are the ultimate team. It's the culture that's created inside that locker room by guys like Barkov and Ekblad and Bobrovsky.
Well, and you have to give the coaching staff some credit.
Yeah.
They certainly have been a part of it too. And I think we've talked a lot about Paul Maurice over the last couple shows, but he certainly is bringing this. He has to get some credit for helping to develop that culture. But
deer hunting season is here, and it's time to own your odds with OnX Hunt, the GPS hunting app trusted by millions of hunters. With the Hunt app, you'll have access to nationwide public and private land ownership information, waypoints, tracks, and much more, all at your fingertips. Go to onxmaps.com/hunt.
The ultimate captain.
onxmaps.com/hunt to sign up today.
Another really cool thing that happened, and I asked this question after the game, is that we couldn't help but notice in the press box that Thomas Nosek embraced Paul Maurice and couldn't stop crying on his shoulder. And I asked Paul Maurice about that after the game, and it has a lot to do with him sticking with him after he put the puck in the seats in game one. It led to the Draisaitl winner in overtime, and how he stuck with him, didn't blame him, kept playing him, all his teammates. And it was really a touching moment. And I asked Maurice about it, and Maurice said that and you could see there's a video that came out today that visualizes what he told me when I asked him after the game. But he said that he put those guys on the ice, Gadjevich, Greer, and Nosek, for the last shift and wanted them to throw their sticks and gloves in the air first because of what they meant to them throughout this playoffs, but especially in the Toronto series when they're down 2-0, he puts the three of them together, and he felt turned the fortune in that series. So, really special team, great coach. It was not long ago where we were talking about he's the longest coach, tenured coach in the NHL that's never won a cup. Now he's won 2 in a row, 11 playoff rounds in 3 years. And I shared after that press conference, he and I shared a couple words, and he said a couple really touching things to me that almost made me well up, like really like personal stuff about him and I. And he just has this ability to really, figure out the right words to say to people to sort of, make you feel special. And he's done that to that team. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I think we talked about this before when he first went to Florida. And I had some friends of mine that were in Winnipeg. And when he left, and they talked about the fact that they just thought he had been such an unbelievable influence on them. And Paul Edmonds, a radio broadcaster up in Winnipeg, who's a good friend of mine, had said to me that he said, I don't think I've ever learned more about the game from anybody other than Paul Maurice. And he said, not just the game X's and O's, but just life around the game. And that stuck with me when he said it. And now after kind of listening to him and seeing him more during these couple Stanley Cup runs, I can see why he had that impact on people.
Yep, without a doubt. Last one, Nate Schmidt. You mentioned him. Really cool to watch him not only win the cup, but get the cup first. I covered him his senior year in college when he was going to be a free agent, and a lot of teams went after him. Obviously, Washington got him. Came close to winning a cup with Nosek in 2018 before they lost to Washington the first year of the Vegas Golden Knights. Pretty sweet to see him lift the cup and get it first.
And a dynamite kid. And I've had my first time I ever chatted with Nate was when he was playing at St. Cloud Cathedral, and then covered him when he was with the Gophers. Just a great guy, always a smile on his face, and just a respected and loved teammate everywhere he's ever been. I think it's really cool to see him get a chance to win the cup and then, yes, be the first guy to get it from the captain. That's it's a pretty special honor.
When we come back, we'll talk Minnesota Wild. We'll be right back. If you read me every day, if you listen to this podcast, I've spent a lot of the last month in South Florida. Well, I return to Minnesota. I go outside and I'm already sweating. It's almost more humid here than it is there. Well, summer is officially here and nothing ruins the vibe faster than a broken AC. Aquarius is taking $98 off any AC repair so you could chill all season long. That's $98 off any AC repair. Plus, if you're looking to upgrade your AC, we'll get a new heating and cooling system for less per day than your daily coffee. And how do you do that? You save 25% off. So again, any new heating and cooling system, 25% off. Their pros give your system the full checkup and explain everything clearly so you're never left guessing. Visit AquariusHomeservices.com to book your service now. That's AquariusHomeservices.com. Aquarius, earning the right to be recommended. And don't forget to mention Russo sent you.
Soak up sun, sand, and smart saving with a certificate at Royal Credit Union. Royal's 4.40% annual percentage yield 12-month certificate has guaranteed returns at maturity and no minimum opening balance for fast and easy opening. Open now at any Royal office or online at rcu.org/savesmart. Early withdrawal penalties could reduce earnings and principal. APY accurate as of 5/27/25. Insured by NCUA.
Back here, worst seats in the house, Michael Russo, Anthony LaPanta, June 24th, Tuesday night at Splitrocks, 7 p.m. is our next live show, so come on out for that. Enjoy dinner and some hockey talk. And, we're a week away from the NHL draft. It's decentralized this year, so the War Room will be here in Minnesota. They'll have a bunch of kids over in Los Angeles and a really cool show that the NHL is planning. The Wild right now at least does not have a first-round pick. They do have a second, no third. So we're not expecting a ton from the draft. Right now it's trade season. Lots of teams tire kicking. We'll talk about that. Wild are also extremely close, I believe, to naming their Iowa Wild coach. I believe they've made their decision. I've heard a bunch of names. I believe that after going with a first-year coach in Brett McLean 2 years ago, that they're going to go the opposite way this year and hire somebody with vast coaching experience, probably at the collegiate level, the American Hockey League level, and even the NHL level. I think they've interviewed people for like Jay Woodcroft. There's other guys available too, the Drew Bannisters of the world and people like that. The one name that I keep on hearing coming up and up is Greg Cronin, and Greg was just the Anaheim Ducks coach. 2 years there and has coached everywhere from Northeastern to the University of Maine to the National Development Team program. He coached the Bridgeport team when he was an assistant coach with the Islanders and Toronto Maple Leafs. Spent 5 years with Colorado, was always at the top of the league with Colorado as well. So we'll see what it happens, but I think that's coming anytime soon. And then Marco Rossi is the one that we've talked about for a year on this show and the potential of him being traded. From talking to a lot of GMs this week and we talked about this last week, it just feels like that futures are still what the Wild are being offered. And, that's something that I think is going to create a bit of an issue if that's it for the Wild, is that unless they can find a secondary trade where maybe you trade him for a prospect and a pick, then flip them somewhere else to get that player you want. Right now, I just don't see an easy path. We'll see what happens, Anthony.
I can't imagine a trade, if it is the only trade, that's just for futures right now. I think the way this roster is set up, it's the next 3-4 years. This team is going to be right there with some of the best in the West. I don't think I would be surprised if Billy made a deal where the only thing he got in return were futures, where now let's say it's a high first-round pick. You're still 4 years away from that player probably reaching the point that Marco Rossi is right now. I don't think that's I'd be surprised if that was the path the Wild were.
Yeah, I agree with you. He has made it extremely clear that if he's going to delete anybody off the roster, whether it's Rossi or anybody else, that he doesn't want to make the team worse. And if you're trading Marco Rossi, you can't just assume that Danilo Yurov in his first year at 21 years old is going to be able to replace him. So I think that that is the plan. So they're going around, they're doing their due diligence. They are in on JJ Peterka. So there was a point where JJ was not getting traded. Buffalo was letting all the teams that were interested in him know that. I think that's changed, and I think there's one big reason for that. I think that they always felt that if somebody offer sheeted him, that they'd match it. But there's ways to structure offer sheets that could, for lack of a better term, turn it into a poison pill. And make it something that you don't want to, whether you structure it with all signing bonuses and make it just exorbitantly big and all that stuff. And what if it's one of your rivals that's doing that, like, say, the New York Rangers or something like that? So I think that they are starting to talk to teams again. I think there's a lot of teams in on him. Problem is he's a winger. So you trade to me, if you make that move then Rossi's involved, which I don't get the impression Buffalo really is interested in Rossi, then you'd have to figure out a way to get a center in some other capacity. And because, again, Peterka is, even though he could probably play center, like a lot of guys in this league, he's turned into a winger. And so then what do you do? And you got to look other places. And as we saw today, I mean, the free agent list right now is just super thin. I mean, super thin. We're talking like Duchesne just signed, Donato just signed. We know Brock Nelson just signed. There's Bennett, who wants to stay in Florida. There's Tavares, who wants to stay in Toronto. And then if you lose, like after that, what is there? Jack Roslovic, who's bigger than Rossi, but not
a difference maker,
and not gritty. Pia Suter, like that'd be a super mid pickup for the Wild. I mean, that's not what fans expect, especially if you're going to trade Rossi.
All that's true, and that goes back to like from day one when I've been a little bit more skeptical that the Rossi trade was imminent. Was that I just don't know who's coming back the other way. And then when you look at some of these players, if this was a normal
offseason, I think it'd be easy. But I think what the Wild didn't take into consideration is that so many teams want to add and not subtract because they have a ton of money now with the cap going up and up and up. And that's going to create a lot of issues, I think, for a lot of teams, not just the Wild, not just now, but it's going to get harder in the future.
That's part of it.
You think it's easier when the money is going up and you got all this money to spend. But the problem is if everybody has it, now you better turn yourself into a destination to try to draw people here.
Yeah.
And have the assets to trade.
I think there's some truth to that for sure. And I'm sure some are looking like, well, I can just go sign somebody else because now I have more money. But to your point, it's not the most like plentiful free agent class. But I've just felt all along like it's not if the deal's not right coming back the other way in a way that makes the Wild better or different, equal but different, that that this trade was not likely to happen. So we'll see. I think a trade would have to bring a player back that was going to maybe it could be a different kind of player, but it's got to be a player at the same kind of level.
Right.
And I just don't know that fits out there. I mean, we'll see.
So now let's just say in the next week to 12 days before July 1, that trade doesn't materialize. Now what do the Wild do? Because they've dug obviously it's contract negotiations, teams and players change their mind all the time and compromise. But this one, it seems like both sides have dug in their heels. Like Marco, at least to this moment, is not interested in a bridge deal anymore unless the Wild are going to probably offer him in the 6.5 range, which I don't get the impression the Wild plan to. They're not taking the 5x5. I don't even know if that's on the table anymore. And it almost feels like the fact that Marco now has essentially said, I want a 7 or 8 year deal in the $7 million range, it's almost him saying, trade me without asking for a trade, because the Wild are not doing that. So where does this go if a trade doesn't materialize? Are we just going to have a contract dispute till training camp?
Yeah,
he's not ARB eligible.
It is interesting. And like, I think it was last week we were talking on the show that these negotiations are always strange in that you battle, and you're not worth that. You're not worth that. You're not worth that. And then as the day you ink the contract, it's you're our guy. Now let's go.
Yeah,
we can't imagine him being happier than signing this guy to the deal. Mm-hmm. So it's a strange balance because you're constantly trying to diminish what you think the guy's value is in the negotiation, and then the minute you sign him, now you think he's worth even more than what you paid for him.
Joe Smith and I did trade tier story today, and it's kind of those fun athletic stories where you break them into categories. It's an option to be traded, it's most likely not, don't even call, all that stuff. But we went through, the one guy that I am hearing is being asked about a lot and is Liam Ogren. And as we mentioned, they don't have a first-round pick this year. I don't think they'd love to trade their first-round pick next year. So now you got to start, if you're going to add pieces to this team and it's going to go the trade route, you're going to have to start giving up prospects most likely. And I think Liam's probably one of those people that is an option to go. I think teams are asking about Wallstedt. I don't think the Wild have any interest in giving him up. I think Spacek would like to leave. I think Freddie Gaudreau is somebody the Wild would be willing to give up, but as we mentioned, they're not, they're looking for centers. So I don't know if giving him up is something that they'd love to do. And then there's Spurgeon and Brodin. Spurgeon, suddenly he's got a modified no trade. Brodin's got no trade protection anymore. Brodin is not getting traded this summer, though, for one big reason, and I think it's gonna. I just get the impression he's not healthy right now, and that he's rehabbing something that might even keep him out for a bit going into training camp. So we'll see that coming up a little bit. So I don't think he's going anywhere. But Spurgeon's one, Goudreau. We talked about Hartman. It's just going to be, you just feel at some point something's going to happen that we're not expecting.
I absolutely agree with that. I think Billy's, he's got something and maybe multiple things in the works that if this happens, then I'm ready to do this. If this happens, then this. The Ogren thing, I think, is interesting because you mentioned the Wild not having a number one pick this year. That would be perhaps their most valuable trade chip, and it would have been at this year's trade deadline, but they had already dealt it. And in lieu of that, Liam Ogren might be right up there with the top, the top commodities they have in what they could bring in return. I don't know what that return would be right now for Ogren.
It would have to be a part of a package, I would
right.
assume.
It isn't just going to be Ogren straight up for a player that's 2 or 3 years further down the road in his career.
Rossi and Ogren for Peterka or Tuck. Let's go. We'll see. But something's going to happen here. I still think it's more likely than not that Rossi is dealt. But we'll see. I mean, right now, like when the Vancouver Canucks, who really want him, is only, really offering the 15th pick, mostly because the Wild have no interest in any of their other players. Like there's no top 6 guy there that you're going to throw on your team. And they don't want to trade Pettersson right now. I just think that just shows you that it's tough that teams, there's no, to trade Rossi, you got to get somebody back. And that's that simple. And you look at Vancouver's roster and who do you want there? Maybe if JT Miller is still there, but we'll see. What do you another one is Carson Lambos. Like I do wonder if they'd love to give him a fresh start, but again, if Brodin's not healthy, how do you do that? It's just Spacek's the one that I think definitely wants to be traded. Juracek's blocking him now, which is funny because they're buddies. Just paying attention to social media this summer, they're doing a lot of stuff together and things like that. But it just feels like Spacek is now sort of trapped, especially with Spurgeon here, Faber here forever. It'll be interesting what they wind up doing down there.
Yeah, I don't know. The Brodin thing's intriguing because it probably does tie your hands a little bit to deal one more defenseman where it looked like they might have been in a position where it was time or being willing to deal one of those guys. Maybe you're not quite so much anymore. Yeah,
and I wonder if like Hunter Haight and Riley Heidt are even getting at this point, if the Wild are going to make some significant moves this summer, it's going to probably have to come from that. It'll just be interesting what happens because I think the expectations are that he's going to go out and make some big moves this summer because everybody's waited for 4 years. But if it doesn't materialize, the one valuable thing that I bet you will start to be the message from Bill if people are underwhelmed by the end of the summer is that as long as they keep their cap space and accrue it during the season, what they couldn't do last year is what they could do this year, and that's pounce on trades at any point in the season, not just at the trade deadline, but make moves early in the season. Wait for stuff to happen, and that might be the most prudent thing to do. Is don't force us.
On July 1st, everybody gets overpaid. Yep. Don't be one of the teams that overpays on July 1st, especially in a year where the free agent class might be a little bit lesser than other seasons.
Let's do this. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back with Vinny LaPanta. He'll have some Vinny's thoughts. We also got a bunch of Twitter questions and things like that. We will be right back with Vinny LaPanta.
And I want to tell you about Twill in the Edina Galleria. Scott Dayton's Twill in the Edina Galleria. TwillMN.com is the website. I'm wearing my Johnny O hat. I'm wearing one of my many Peter Millar shirts. Johnny O and Peter Millar are two of my favorite brands out of Twill in the Edina Galleria. When I've been going to Wolves games lately, I've been wearing my Dingman shoes. I've been wearing my Brax pants, my either Peter Millar or Johnny O shirts, pullovers. The Wolves games are weird because they're really cold, and then they turn on the fire jets before the game and singe your eyebrows. You need to be prepared for all kinds of different temperatures in that building. And I just use all my Twill stuff. And as we do more shows here at TalkWork.com on video, I'll be wearing more Twill stuff because it's really simple. I don't always try to look good. Sometimes I'm very happy being a slob. and I wear old sweats and t-shirts. If I'm trying to look presentable in any way, Talk North meetings, sponsor meetings, big games, going out in public, going out to dinner, I just put on something I bought at Twill. It's just that simple. If I put on something I bought at Twill, I'm going to look good. I'm playing a Randy Shavers golf tournament on Monday. I'm going to wear Twill stuff to that too. Golf, walk around town, dinner, whatever. TwillMN.com. Go to Twill in the Edina Galleria. They're laid back. They love talking sports. They're nice people. Tell them we sent you. You'll have a good time, and you'll end up walking out with something great.
If you're looking for a refreshing THC drink, well, check out Giggly. It tastes like your favorite cocktail with no aftertaste and just pure, bold flavor. It's made with real fruit juice and all natural ingredients. It's a Minnesota-made gem. You can find it at liquor stores and Quick Trip locations across Minnesota, or get it shipped nationwide. Plus, with a new low pricing and low-calorie options, it's the perfect guilt-free sip. Try Giggly today.
All right, 37 minutes into the pod, and we somehow put Vinny LaPanta to sleep, everybody. So now he's going to have to...
He might not be the only one.
Yeah, I know. I was getting a little worried about you here. Seems like you both might have gotten too much sun today and drank a little too much cocktails, maybe even.
No. We were locked in. No, perfect amount of sun, and we were locked in on a golf match.
Nice, and you kicked butt. All right, Vinny, what are some thoughts?
I've got a couple thoughts, wild thoughts, but I'll start with the NHL thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
There's been some rumors of McDavid leaving his press conference at the end. He wasn't kind of all about his roster for next year. Just kind of thinking about it, if he is going to win a cup and he wants to sign something for $18 million. He's on a team right now that's gone to back-to-back Stanley Cup finals. What other team could possibly be a decent or a better fit with his new contract that could put him in a better spot than Edmonton?
Yeah. By the way, your next question, definitely talk more into the microphone. But, I don't know. I mean, Minnesota, they already have a 97. With the cap going up, I think that there'd be a lot of teams that are prepping for him. I think if he left there, it'd be someplace like Toronto. Obviously, they're going to lose Marner. They got to pay Nyes, but do they sort of wait for that? My gut says, even though he definitely said today that he's in no rush to sign an extension, my gut says that he does sign some sort of extension. I just don't think it's going to be 8 times 18 or 19. I think it's going to be a 3-year type bridge deal. And, he is an agent that has done this many, many times. He's done it with Austin Matthews, and in today's day and age with the cap going up and up and up, I think it makes sense to sign bridge deals. I was talking to Barrera today that if I'm the Wild and I am not getting Kaprizov to agree to a 7 or 8 year deal, and it is it's not a shoo-in that he does something like that, I think you talk to Kirill about signing a 3 or 4 year deal, and I think that makes the most sense for Kirill. He punts it down the road, but he stays in a place that he loves. He waits for the cap to go up. He sees that Bill Guerin can turn this team into a winner, and I think that'd be the same thing with McDavid. Instead of committing the rest of your life, the rest of your career, essentially to Edmonton, sign for 3 or 4 years and see if this team can get over the hump. So I don't think that he is gonna leave, especially after Draisaitl signed for 8. But I don't think he's gonna sign for 8 years.
I kind of thought there was a chance that Draisaitl signed,
and then
they talked about it.
I agree with you. I figured that was the case too. I don't totally agree with that. Believe that anymore.
Really?
I don't. I think that. But I think McDavid stays. I don't think he leaves.
Do you think he takes a team-friendly discount to be able to take another cup run or no?
I don't think he's going to get 20% of the cap for that very reason. I think he realizes more than anything the importance of flexibility. But and the other thing is that the one thing that Florida did do this year that we've seen Vegas do in the past is they took advantage of LTIR. Well, that's going to be patched up in the next CBA. That isn't happening anymore. You're going to need there's going to be a playoff salary cap. Sure, it sounds like in the next CBA. So like Tkachuk getting hurt at the Four Nations essentially helped Florida because it got that Marchand and Jones. But I do agree. I don't think he's going to want 19-20 million, even though he could get it. Where the Wild are probably going to have to give Kaprizov 15 to keep him.
But so 2 things came up there. One is I think that's been overlooked that Florida was able to add because they were doing the same thing that the last few Cup champions have all done.
Yeah,
which is I hate it. I'm glad it's going to be addressed. But the other part of this.
By the way, that was one reason why I was so on the Wild for not doing it this year, because the one thing I was hearing is that it was going to stop. So I'm like, this is going to be your only opportunity to actually.
But the other thing is, and I think you had made the comment maybe yesterday that, and I don't know exactly what the number is, but it's something like no Cup winner has ever had a guy making more than $10 million per season on their contract. I think Bob's exactly 10, having won these, but it does make you think just a little bit, like, can you really win with one guy making $18 million bucks?
I don't disagree there, but we're gonna have to see the new math as the cap goes to 95.5 next year, then 103, and then and it goes on and on and on. I think it changes the dynamic a little bit
for sure.
And there's gonna be a lot of teams that aren't gonna go to that much. Like, that's gonna be the one interesting thing here is like we like we're gonna see a lot of teams that I don't think go to the cap, and not because they're being smart. I think it's because there's going to be internal budgets on a lot of team. I'll be interested to see if this team does it. I think they're going to go to 95.5, but when it's 103, 112, is Craig Leopold going to go that route? We will see. But the one thing though is that you got to pay McDavid. Like, he's not taking 10. Draisaitl is going to start next season making 14. He's getting more than that. We know that on his next deal. What was your next Vinny's thought?
Kind of watching Barkov in the playoffs. I guess you witnessed it firsthand. Is there any guy that would be better suited to be a captain? Like, that guy looks like he doesn't care at all about scoring in any way.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, I don't even care if I have 0 points ever. Yeah. I just want to win. Where we've talked about if you were drafting some hypothetical fantasy team, it's McKinnon, McDavid, 1A, 1B, whatever. Barkov has to be in the conversation just based on what he's done the last couple of years.
Yeah, well, I the one thing I totally agree with you is that what he's proven is the importance of defense and how that's almost more important than the superstar scoring. I mean, McDavid could do nothing, has done nothing against the Panthers in Sunrise in 2 straight playoffs. 0. Like, you remember even the one game last year where he had 4 points, it was all power play stuff.
Right.
I think he has 1 5-on-5 point in Florida in 2 playoffs going straight up against Barkov. It shows you the importance of that it's more important to check than have all the offense in the world. And so I agree with you. I mean, like I go back to the way that Koivu used to play, and we used to all just rip on it because he also was kind of like that. He didn't cheat the game, but he was not Alexander Barkov, because Barkov also offensively could be a superstar if he wanted to. Look at the play that he made all throughout Game 6, but look at the play that he made in the pivotal game against Carolina on the winning goal of Verhaeghe. I mean, he's just a freak of nature, and he is the friendliest person in the world. Like, you could see why that team is so welcoming to walk into. He creates the culture there. I know a lot of people, the cynics out there, roll their eyes at the room, and the importance of having good people in the room. But Barkov is the epitome, I think, of a guy that could change the culture of an organization. And he's taken all these unlikable people that were on other teams and turned them into this unbelievable community of athletes. It's pretty special.
Yeah. I know you guys talked about this already, but the Rossi thing, just maybe like a different way to look at it. If you're another GM of another team, if you're a contender, you're not a Marco Rossi away from winning the cup. If you're a bottom of the barrel team, you're not giving away any futures or potential top 5 picks for them. So you have a finite amount of teams that are in kind of that middle that would want them. And then of those teams, who needs a second line center? So you have a handful of teams that would even want the guy. And if you're Billy Guerin, you kind of have to win or at least be a contender the next few years. So you can't take any futures. So is there a chance, like it just doesn't seem feasible that you're going to get something good in return. So is it more so like, is there a chance that there's a bridge deal or a 1-year deal or a 2-year deal or something? Because it doesn't seem like you're going to get a
he's
player.
got 4 years until his UFA. So there's definitely ways to do it, but they're going to have to overpay him at this point because he's going to need to trust the fact that he's going to be in the top 6 to maximize his thing. I know Anthony is definitely not going to agree with me on this, but I'm telling you from talking to GMs in the league that have and scouts in the league. I mean, I talked to somebody today that's high up with a team that was asking me about Rossi. I think they made an unbelievable mistake in the playoffs treating him the way they did. They absolutely devalued him to the rest of the league. The fact that so many teams in this league need a number 2 center and they're getting such little traction on him tells you that, because they let everybody else in the league know that they don't think they're a Marco Rossi away from winning the Cup.
Yeah, and that the argument Ryan Hartman outplayed him, he did, but Ryan Hartman outplayed him. I like Ryan Hartman, but Ryan Hartman outplayed him. He's not worth a lot in a trade value as far as a young player. I don't know. It just seems like I just think what the plan is.
Montreal badly needs number 2 center. They have shown, as far as I know, no interest. Calgary is looking to add a center. They have so far been very lukewarm on him, as far as I know. Carolina is one team that I think is shown to be interested. Vancouver has interest, but the Wild don't seem to have interest in their players. Utah has always had interest, but I think they already feel they're small enough. Buffalo doesn't seem it just, I don't know. I mean, we'll see. I'm not claiming to know everything, but I just think from talking to some teams about people asking me about Marco, the one thing they all have constantly asked me whenever I call these people's sources from other teams is, what happened in the playoffs? Why don't what happened? Why they feel they couldn't win with them? And I just think if the Wild knew, and they did, that the contract situation was something that they didn't find palatable and what they wanted to pay him, to then immediately put him in that, throw him in a situation that essentially devalued him, it wasn't the smartest thing to do before a situation where you planned on trying to trade the player. So I don't know if you agree with. I know that you probably are cynical with some of the stuff I say.
A little bit. Not. I mean, I'm excited about the fact that you acknowledge that you don't know everything. You don't claim to know everything. That was the highlight of that little spiel. But I think there are a lot of general managers out there and a lot of scouts out there that generate their own opinion on players, and I think a lot of times there's a little bit that gets based on how the current team uses the player, but a lot of times they're looking at a guy differently.
But this was so public.
Yeah, I agree, but I think it's there's a lot of times they look at it and say that I think this team's misusing the guy. I think with our team, in our system, with our the role we see him either more or less valued based on that. So I think there's something to it for sure, maybe with some teams, but I also think so many times, that's why it often works for players, like a change of scenery. It's because this team saw him differently than the team that already had him. And that's sometimes why trades happen, because the team trading says, okay, they look at him as a third or fourth line guy. We look at him as maybe he could be a second line guy. And therefore, we're willing to give up this to give the guy a shot.
It's a really good point. It's absolutely the right point. And we see that, especially with Florida. We've seen that here in Minnesota, guys that were miscast somewhere else and go to this situation. And
Ryan Hartman's an example.
Exactly. It'll be interesting. One player I do wonder if the Wild have shown interest in is Isaac Howard. He is somebody that if you signed him and he was willing then to leave college, I think he could probably step right into your lineup next year. I think that makes sense if you go the young route. I think he's a little different because he's probably more NHL ready than the average prospect. But when I look around the league, I just don't see a lot of fits for him. Like Carolina, I think likes Marco, but they probably want the Wild to take Kotkaniemi, and I don't think they have any interest in that. You think Chicago would be interested? I'm hearing that they have no interest, or I thought they had interest, but I'm hearing conflicting things there. Somebody told me they were very interested, and then I checked with somebody that said that they weren't. Columbus is somebody that the Wild talked to Rossi about last year, but they are set up the middle unless you're acquiring one of those centers. Pittsburgh, you would think would be interested in somebody like Marco in a rebuild. I don't know if that's changed. Anaheim, I don't know. It's just going to be really interesting what happens here in the next week or so.
How is Rossi liked in the locker room?
Loved. That from what I see, he's liked a lot. It's hard not to like him. I mean, he's such a pro. They also, I've talked about this before, but they've dragged him into the fight too, from the perspective of like going out with guys, going on vacation. He's somebody that he's all about playing hockey. Doesn't drink, doesn't do bad stuff, all that type of things. And sometimes, if they're all going at Turks and Caicos, he's going with his girlfriend to Cancun. This past year, it was a little different where, you saw on Instagram him hanging out on vacation during the Four Nations with Fleury and Spurgeon and things like that. I think they, when I talk to guys like Foligno about Rossi, they just freaking love him. So it's hard not to like that guy. Any other thoughts, or we should go to Twitter questions?
I have one quick thought. You're not going to like it, but
I think I'm going to like it then.
Yeah. Quickly, you talk about how the Minnesota Wild tend to block players, and you've talked about this a lot. This year we had half the team hurt, and we had no one to fill in spots. So, who are we blocking? Well, Ogren maybe, but he came up and couldn't fill the shoes of really anyone.
No. They had major cap issues. Ogren scored one of the biggest goals of the season, and they had to set him down the next day. He was ready to come up at the end of the year. He was playing unbelievable down there, and they couldn't get him on the roster because of their cap situation.
Yeah, but who else are we blocking?
I'm just saying, this has been something. But when I say blocking, I'm saying that that. Essentially playing these guys and playing them and dealing with the repercussions of it. When Zucker and Nino and Granlund and all these guys were here at Coyle, they could not get on number one power play, top 6, things like that. Yeah. So I'm just saying, at some point, and I think in these 4 years during this buyout things, there just could have there comes a point where you got to play your kids and just play them, not constantly re-sign the Marcus Johanssons and bring in older guys. I don't feel like they had the right plan in this 4 years. I think the second they decided to buy out Parise and Suter, they should have just committed to starting to play kids. And we're never seeing it, ever. Because they're always in this happy medium where they feel like they have to compete to make the playoffs. I'm saying there just comes a point where instead of signing Marcus Johansson, you play Liam Ogren and you play him until he turns into a player.
So you're saying more during the buyout period because you're not going to be a contender anyway.
Yeah.
Run the young kids up there.
That's my only point. Is there just comes a point where you have to play your kids, and we're seeing it even now. Marcus Johansson didn't re-sign at 800 and he's going to be the 13th forward. They're going to wind up playing him in situations where, he's going to be in the top 6 or things like that. One reason why I think that Marcus Johansson was re-signed is in case they trade Liam Ogren, just to have that insurance policy. So, I mean, that's my point.
If Ogren plays better than him, Ogren takes his spot.
Not if he's traded next week.
Well,
so there we go.
Traded, that's a different story.
That's my
point. If they're
point.
both here, then he's not being blocked. He'll outplay the guy. He'll earn the spot.
That's all I got. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thanks. Go back to your couch. All right. Let's see. Let's take some Twitter questions, and then we'll wrap up the show. Brian asked about Iowa. I mentioned some names. Somebody asked Mosey about Ryan O'Reilly being a potential trade target. He has no protection and fits the mold this team wants. I don't think he has no trade protection, but he is, in essence, has a full no trade clause. We saw that this year. There were a lot of teams at the deadline that wanted Ryan O'Reilly, and the respect that they have for him, he decided he wanted to stay in Nashville. So it's totally still up to him. Mitch says, Mitch says, also, does the NHLPA or Craig Leopold push for an end to cap recapture and CBA negotiations? I mean, there's no cap recapture anymore. Cap recapture was a transition period between the previous CBA with teams that they felt were circumventing a cap and the current CBA that we're currently in. So that's long gone. So there's no cap recapture anymore. Let's see. Paulie asks, Anthony, I'll just throw this at you because he's asking at me. He goes, have you ever... It's amazing that I have Paulie muted, but I saw it and I thought it was funny.
Amazing that I don't have him. I don't know who he is, but I don't have him muted. Have you ever considered
covering another team other than this poverty organization? Seems you should have higher aspirations, or is perpetual mediocrity your thing? I am a pretty much perpetual... I mean, that probably actually would be a great nickname for me. I'm kind of mediocre. Have you ever read my writing?
I haven't read it very often, but sometimes. But I have people ask every once in a while about that, and I know you've made mention of people that have said, with how good a writer you are, you deserve to cover a team that makes a deep run, all that kind of thing. To me, it's more the fans and the passion in the market.
Yes.
And that's what makes covering the Minnesota Wild so much fun.
Yeah.
If you were in a market where the fans were apathetic, where the building wasn't full, it wasn't exciting, where the team wasn't competitive, that would be different. I don't. It's not like you're as a writer or a TV guy hoping to get traded to somewhere else where the team has a chance to win this year.
Right.
I'd much rather be in a market where the fans are as passionate as the Minnesota Wild fans are. The building's full every night. The TV ratings are high. People are listening to the radio. They're talking about the team. They're excited about the team. They're wearing the jerseys. There's a buzz around town about what's going to happen here over the next 3-4 years.
Right.
I'd much rather be in that market than, I'm going to say, probably 20 of the other markets in the league that I don't think rival the Wild when it comes to the knowledge level and the intensity of the excitement with the fan base.
Yeah, well said. That's exactly the correct answer. I mean, that's why I stay. That's why I have no desire to leave. And with my job, with my role at The Athletic, I get a little bit of both. I just left for a month to cover the Eastern Conference Final and the Stanley Cup Final. So I get to still be there. But I will say the more and more I watch this type of stuff, the more and more I hope that the fans here get to experience what I get to every single summer and covering these. I mean, I think this is my 20-something. Like, I've covered the league for 30 years. I think this was about 20 Stanley Cup Finals that I've been at, and there's nothing like it. Jason Hughes asked, what former players are in the Wild's front office? I feel like I never heard about specific positions for Mikko, Derek, Stepan. Well, I don't know if anybody has actual, defined titles. They're almost like apprentices, if that's a word. Mikko is not part of the organization. Derek Stepan is very much involved in everything from scouting to player development. Alex Goligoski is also trying to figure that out. He's also in the front office. Fleury will do the same. In terms of players that actually have a role, former players, that's pretty much the development staff. So Brad Bombardier, who's the head of it, Cody McLeod, Matty Hendricks is the Iowa GM, but also still does some player development, things like that. I feel like I'm forgetting somebody in player development as well. But anyway, that's about it. There's players like Carl Hagelin that are in the Wild organization and people like that. Irrelevant asks, was anyone fired, excommunicated for the Wild passing on Bill Zito twice? That's actually not true. Bill Zito was somebody the Wild wanted to talk to, and I had talked to Bill Zito a lot during the process before I believe they hired Paul Fenton and then maybe even Bill Guerin. And the thing there was his wife was sick, and it just wasn't the right time. The Wild have kind of gotten unlucky on a lot of that type of stuff. Like the year before Steve Yzerman went to Tampa, the Wild offered him the job before Chuck Fletcher, but he just felt like in an Olympic year, as he was the GM of the 2010 Olympics, that he felt it would be unfair to the Wild to do both. And then once he got past the Olympics, he goes to Tampa Bay. The one that I would say the Wild should probably have second thoughts on or is regrets on is Julien Brisebois. Like the year they hired Paul Fenton, they brought Brisebois in for an interview, and it was like a cursory interview at best. They had already made up their mind who they were hiring, and I think that's one that they should probably regret right there. What are the possibilities of Billy talking initiative like Bill Zito and getting a big name player, for example, Barzal, Larkin, Horvat? The Wild have called on all these guys. I've written it. They've called on Barzal and Horvat. Right now, Matthew Darsh, the new GM there, doesn't want to trade either. I'm sure they've called on Larkin. I can't imagine that Steve Yzerman is looking to trade him. Somebody asked me about McDavid. Anything else, Anthony? Somebody asked if you would sign Brad Marchand for 3 times 9.
I would not. We talked about this last week.
I would.
Somebody will sign him, and
I think he's going to get 4 times 9, probably from the Leafs.
And so, what I prefaced it last week when we talked about it is that I'm not saying that he's not worth that. I'm saying I wouldn't want to go 4 years at that rate.
Yeah. Couple more. Somebody asked my personal process behind my vote of picking Bennett over Marchand for the Conn Smythe. I think, first of all, it's an entire playoff, and Marchand entering the Stanley Cup Final had 4 goals. Bennett had 15 goals throughout the playoffs, 13 on the road for a team that had to play 13 games away from South Florida because of they start on the road in every single series. So I just felt he was more consistent. And then when I looked at it too, it's like, yeah, Marchand had an unbelievable Stanley Cup final, but he was 6 goals, but Bennett had 5. So it wasn't like that Bennett just disappeared in the final. So that was it was a tough call. Like I just feel that Marchand, the energy that he brought to the team, he scored 2 of the biggest goals they had in the final. It was a tough call, but at the end of the day, I just felt from a consistency standpoint and the fact that he had 13 goals on the road, I just felt Sam Bennett had to be my
great
pick. Yeah.
I'd have voted for Marchand just because I think his role in what he brought had more intangible value to it than what Bennett brings.
He helped drag, to use my Rossi term, dragged Lundell and Listerine into the fight. He did it all pretty much, playing third line minutes, second power play. So it's a good point. I would have been fine if Marchand won either way. But I did notice that of the 18 voters, 11 had Bennett as with first. There were 18 voters for the Conn Smythe. 11 of us had Bennett number 1. So I feel like I still was probably on the right side of making that decision. Somebody asked thoughts on Taves. He might be cheap and worth a look at center. First of all, he was not just going to be cheap. They're going to have to sign him. You'd have to sign him to a contract that's going to have a ton of probably incentives and things like that because you're allowed to do that when somebody misses as much time as he has. Plus, he's still over 35. He has made the Wild are interested in Jonathan Taves. Trust me. They have talked to Pat Brisson about Jonathan Taves. That is allowed. I think Jonathan has a certain handful of teams that he wants to go to: Colorado, Winnipeg, maybe even Anaheim because Q is there. I think Bill Guerin would love to bring Jonathan Taves here. If it doesn't happen, it's because that Jonathan Taves just decided that he wanted to go somewhere else. So I think that's a good. I
have no other thoughts.
Yeah. Our buddy Marty goes, if I'm going to Splitrocks on the 24th, do I get off in Laramie or Cheyenne? It's a Wyoming joke.
Yeah, whichever one you want. Tell him to take a left at Cheyenne and hope for the best.
Alexander asked, do the Wild have any interest in Mika Zibanejad? Zibanejad has made it extremely clear he's not waiving right now. So I think that's the pod. Anthony, thanks for coming over to my place for a change. What a treat.
We were on our way home from a thorough whooping on the golf course.
Which course were you at this year?
Today we played White Eagle. We're playing Keller in St. Paul tomorrow. But today was 36 holes at Keller, and it was a solid win for Vinny and I today.
June 24th is our next live show. That's Tuesday night at Splitrocks in Wyoming at 7 p.m. Come on out. You get to meet Anthony LaPanta. That'd be a dream. If Vinny's in town, he should come.
Vinny might be there.
Nice. We could do live Vinny's thoughts, or we could see you. Aquarius Home Services.
Actually, the guys at the golf course today said they might come. So
nice.
We'll see what
awesome.
happens. Maybe we'll get a great crowd.
That's a fun place because we have a private room as well. Great food up there. So come out to Splitrocks 7 p.m. on Tuesday night. Thanks to our incredible sponsors, Aquarius Home Services, your local authorized dealer for Connecticut Water Treatment System. And this is the Aquarius Home Services studio, by the way. Clamshell Beach Resorts, Giggly THC Beverages, Onyx Maps, Twill in the Edina Galleria, and Royal Credit Union. Talk to you next week, everybody.
So much coming out, there's nothing going in. I know that you feel like you're never gonna win. Oh, but the world